Thank you very much for letting me become a host for this meeting, because I've really enjoyed this group of people, very creative people, and that I have enjoyed looking at all your presentations and find that there's a kind of theme of looking at the betweens and beyonds in space and time and relationship, looking at that which is sometimes invisible. And that's been hard to point at, and yet it's such a relevant thing. I'm asked to introduce you, but some of you I don't know very well. So what I'm going to do is simply invite you all to introduce yourselves one at a time, and I'll ask Judy, please, to start with that. Introduce yourself and what your topic is about.
Okay. I'm going to read mine. I am a social worker turned college professor turned artivist who has come to think the only way to design real change is through languaging and the arts. I study cybernetics and construct videos in a desire to learn and share something new. I embrace transdisciplinary connections, anti-communications, and view tension, conflict, and differences as asynchronicities worth exploring. I like living by my desires, something specific yet general enough not to be goals. I am interested in designing provocations that provoke change of our systems, not change in our systems. Yes, I want a new society, and I am opposed to violence of any sort. So, I attempt to perform perturbations, provocations nested in the biology of love, so that conversations might generate a society I, you, me, we desire. Since 1992, I have videotaped many ASC meetings. In this particular video, part 1 of 4, Annetta Pedretti demonstrates cybernetics in action during a segment she called Living in the Eye of Language at the 1993 ASC conference. There were 3 presenters that day, Annetta, Gordon Pass, and Lou Kaufman. A cybernetic mix of poetry, mathematics, and I don't know what to label Gordon, maybe a mix of all things. There was such variety in the room, the dynamic unexplainable. First, Annetta generating a conversation when taking an act of violence and turning it into a message, thus breaking a loop of violence. When it's not violence, when violence is heard as a message and one acts according to the message one hears. Message, a starting point for generating something new. Then a demonstration of a dynamic that emerges when pointing a video camera at itself, the actual thing itself in recursive oscillations, going to the edges of infinite regressions, shifting us away from objects towards rhythms, another starting point, and a current interest. Finally, Herbert Broom, at the 1995 ASC meeting, offering a method for designing composing, sharing his ideas on generating nests for protecting one's compositions. My main interest is videography, which I nest in my secondary interest of creating a society I desires. So even when I make a bad video, I am protected. Paul.
Thank you, Judith. That was really, I loved your presentation. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
It reminded me of the open your word experiments that were kind of video and sculpture combined, where the words were dynamic and moving in space. I loved that. Brilliant. Anyway, so my piece is about we call it the Cybernetic Art Matrix, and I kind of made up this little catchphrase called the CAM. It's a word, the CAM era. Get it? So it's like the CAM era. So it's like the era of surveillance where everything is mapped with like a GPS system. In any case, I want to thank, first of all, my filmmaker who was sitting next to me in my interview. His name is Logan Gilpin, and he was raised in Fort Worth. And he's been a filmmaker since the early 2000s. He worked with NBC, and he has a short film about Fort Worth called The Rose, and it's a sense of place, and it won a Telly Award in 2009. And he can't be here today, but he was really instrumental in realizing my project. And we met on an airline flight on the way to the capital of Alabama in last couple of years ago. My uncle had passed away, and we had a conversation on the plane. And upon landing, the woman behind us said, "You know, you guys should have made a podcast." That sounded like a podcast. So we did, and it ended up being an hour conversation, and it was really kind of exciting because, you know, I'm a big fan of Warhol, a huge fan because he was a pioneer in technology, as I know, and it's really special to me, and particularly that our interview was basically just one long shot, like we just talked for an hour, and there was very little manipulation, maybe a little corrections in you know, some syntax, but and then about me, I'm a visual artist, scholar, and writer, and I work in cybernetic arts and as a producer, and also my day job is I help with a business management software company called Thrive, and I'm a quality analyst. I listen to calls. I'm an auditory learner, so I listen to calls in India, and I evaluate them, and it's kind of teaching by script. Like I write by script. I point out what they did well, what they did. These kids are really brilliant too, and it's wonderful to work with them. And I've been with the company about 20 years. And in any case, let's see. So I live in Dallas, and I completed my MFA in Art and Technology in 2011. And then I went on and got an MA in Visual Art and Cybernetics, also at the University of Texas at Dallas. And currently, Logan and I are working on a hybrid 2D virtual reality film based on the all-encompassing design and structural influence of Roy Ascott. He's my touchstone. Cybernetic Art Matrix. He kind of like invented the vision that I had, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, what we're trying to do is virtually realize a three-dimensional graph. So it's kind of a musical staff, but also in space. And because it's film and you're immersed in it, it also, and there's a temporal aspect, so it also encompasses the fourth dimension as well as the third dimension. Simply, it's sort of like, it's a plaid world after all. Anyway, so what we're trying to do is realize Ascott's what I call prescient concept of the age of the cybernetic art matrix, which I also, like I said before, call the CAM era. And it's now the current point of view, especially with this new surveillance that's going on in every aspect.
Way over.
Am I way over? Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
Robert, right.
Yeah.
Robert.
Oh, okay.
How about
I'm Robert Martin, and so my interest is in saving the world. Good luck with that. However, what I've noticed about all of the presentations that I watched from all of the groups, but especially from this group, is that everybody is involved in using various cybernetic tools. And that was the topic of my video. And so I see the whole point of cybernetics is not telling other people how to run the world, but rather giving them tools to become more reflexive so that they can transform and change themselves. So that's what I see as the key to cybernetics and what cybernetics has to offer the world, whether it's in science or whether it's in, I was basically a therapist. I worked with teachers. I was a professor and did various things. So it's always working with individuals and groups. And it's always a matter of bringing about transformation by giving people experiences and then giving them tools to be reflexive about what they're doing, whole idea of circularity. So that's where change comes from, not from telling other people what to do. So I really appreciate this group, and really the whole conference so far has been quite wonderful.
And you pass on to?
Claudia.
So yeah, I'm Claudia, and I have a presentation that I call Thoughts on Time, Ecology and Art. And I was preparing this in mind, having in mind a number of contributions by other people I have met before at the ASC. So Larry Richards is here, for example. I'm quite fascinated by his notion of cybernetics as a craft in and with time. So that is how I start and try to approach this the question of time from several other perspectives. I myself have a background in architecture, and then I did postgraduate studies in media art at the ZKM in Karlsruhe. That's where I met Bill Seaman, and he introduced me. And he introduced me to the PhD network of Roy Ascott. So where he did his PhD, and then I did my PhD there. And now I am in China, based in China with Tom and Candy, actually, at in the same department. So there are lots of connections. And so the question of time and art, and the question of dimensionality of time, that is a question that also comes in Judy's presentation, is quite interesting. So there seems to be a notion of depth in time that is related also to notions of space that I'm very much interested in. And in my presentation, I look into questions, how this relates to questions of ecology, what it means to look from above. I show the blue marble image has been so influential, and I think this is a viewpoint we have taken lately, that we look from above, from a designer's point of view. That is not so interesting, because that would be a typical kind of planner's point of view, but you analyze movement, then you don't see experience anymore. So then I go back and say, okay, where are we in cybernetics? And I look at questions that are addressed by Uexküll, and then Maturana has based his research on von Uexküll. That's quite interesting. So the question of Umwelt, I recently saw a translation that says it's environing worlds rather than environment. So that's the constructed worlds, and constructed environment is not something that we passively encounter. And so I'm looking into questions of narrative, myth, language, the question of technology, of tools, or what I'm interested in. So how can we maybe change this view again? What kind of tools would we need in order to reconnect or create different kind of connections and relations between us and others and other beings, nature? Yeah, and so then at the end there's this term, maybe we call it anthropo-cosmotechnology. And saying the term cosmo, I just wanted to say Stuart Umpleby has worked with some Russian cyberneticians. Quite interesting, because there has a different view on evolutionary view, because it's not based on Darwin. So an alternative to the view that we are actually always in struggle. So there's more focus on mutual aid. So that's what I'm interested in. And now I stop. Pilar has already waved. And I hand over to Zane.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Zane Gillespie. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm a composer of what you might call contemporary classical music, or so-called concert music. I'm a music theorist, a scholar, a pianist, vocalist. I'm on the executive board for music theory for the Southern chapter of the College Music Society. For those of you who have not already viewed them, let me encourage you to please do just that. Go to the links provided in the schedule to view my two-part submission, which is really just a postscript, if you will, some thoughts I had after a paper of mine appeared in volume 26, issue 2 through 3 of Cybernetics and Human Knowing, about the structure of Herbert Bruhn's notion of implausibility, a plurality of things, interconnected, individually innocuous, but in combination, in the interconnectedness, they present a challenge to human complacency, anthropocentric expectations in music, in art, and cybernetics. I believe I've been able to come up with a formulation that goes well beyond simple paradox to address the application of cybernetics to art and music in a new way.
So I think we have Diego still left to.
Oh yeah, sorry, Diego.
Oh, hello to everyone. I'm Diego Fagundes from Brazil. I'm an architect and also an illustrator. I have to say that I'm very happy to be able to participate in this discussion, although the circumstances do not bring much reason for happiness. I would like to thank all the other members of this panel, including the moderator, for the interesting discussions that each of them raises. My work, or what I have tried to say with my short video presentation, have to do with a conceptual model for conversation between alchemy and cybernetics. So my research departs from a series of images. Some were collected, or others are illustrations that I have produced in recent years. Those images act as interfaces for reflection and communication. I'm sharing some of these images with you because I think that it will be very useful for understanding. The aim of my approach is to explore some similarities and overlaps between these two bodies of knowledge and to establish a relationship across time and space. In reality, I think that is precisely the question of time that unifies our 6 presentations. Underlying the question of art and composition, there is mainly a question of time and language. This would be a very brief summary, but as we agreed before, not to take too long at this initial moment, I can stop here. Maybe I back to this image later.
Put the link in the chat, and then people will be able to look at it later.
Okay.
Yes. So are there further comments you wish to make, or questions you wish to ask each other? Or shall I ask you questions?
Well, I have a question for Claudia. Where did she go?
Yeah,
Just
I'm
here.
here.
Oh, there you are. In the cybernetics context, we're all of us familiar with handling circularity in systems of thought, systems of praxis. We've all seen the formalisms for circularity, such as a self-pointing arrow or some other form of re-entry. And these symbols, these signs, exemplify this cybernetic way of thinking. But the question I have for you after having viewed your presentation is, do you think there might be a way of thinking which not only includes the observer participant in the system, for example, but actually erases any distinction between, say, map and territory, or between, let's say, formalism and what's being formalized, or between the microcosm and the macrocosm?
I'm thinking. I'm not entirely sure whether I can think really what that would mean, because it seems to me that this would mean that everything enters processes in such a way that they are never formed, that they are never recognizable. Is that what it would mean if we, if we dissolve the distinction between micro and macro?
Right. Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, go ahead.
I think a conversation. I think we actually have that in in design. In design education, we sit in the studio and then we say, then students put things really close together and say, yeah, you see, they're together, and say, no, but you have to have a distance because otherwise they cannot speak.
Right. Exactly.
So I think this kind of distinctions are important.
They're necessary.
Because we need for any conversation, we need something that defines itself as conversant.
Yes, yes.
So there's another way of dissolving the difference between the map and the territory, and that is what Heinz von Forster pointed out kind of after Maturana, is the map of the map is the territory. In other words, we are self-contained. We are, whether we like it or not, we're self-reflexive. We're in a circular, we're in a loop. And if we could look at that, then we would have a totally different way of looking at reality, because all of a sudden there's not this distinction between the objective territory and our subjective mapping of it. There is rather the map, yes, looking at the map of the map, which that is what cognition is. That's, we're in this circularity. We need to examine that.
But that's what makes these Kantian neural organizing categories not just necessary, but inevitable. An inevitable function of being human. I think it may be. I agree wholeheartedly with Claudia, whose presentation was really meditative and contemplative, because I think that to truly comprehend the unity of opposites, which is what we're talking about. For instance, when Claudia talks about microcosm, macrocosm, I think it really is going to be a problem for our limited human imaginations. I'm tempted to think that it really is beyond human understanding. because it requires a consciousness, as Anthony Hodgson said yesterday, that is able to go beyond human rationality. And with that in mind, I was wondering, Claudia, if you really are married, as it were, to the term anthropo-cosmic to refer to this worldview.
Yeah, I mean, the question is whether we I don't, you know, I cannot think from another point of view as my own.
Right. And in fact, that's what I'm saying, by way of agreeing with you. I'm in wholehearted agreement with you, and was just.
Well, that doesn't generate conversation.
No. The question, my agreement with Claudia, was leading up.
I'd like to find spaces where I disagree with people so I can actually have a conversation. So I would be interested. I know, Claudia, thank you very much.
I actually do have a question for Claudia that represents a point of disagreement.
Well, I think we should involve other people in the panel in the conversation.
Great.
What do others think about the term anthropo-cosmic? When it really does seem to be humanly impossible to comprehend the unity of opposites.
Well, I think that one of the things I wanted to say was how this relates to what Annetta talks about when she points the camera at itself, so to speak, through the monitor, and thus generates that recursive processing turning into what might call oscillation. Now, later in that conversation, it's made clear this is not how humans function, but it is an analogy, if you will, to going to that infinite regressive place where objects disappear and rhythms appear. And I'm intrigued, and I think this relates to what you're saying, Zane. I'm intrigued in provoking and understanding and exploring those rhythms, if you will. And I think that relates to everybody's presentations.
Yes, I agree.
The way she said that you cut the thread, it still becomes the new path, is part of what you always do.
That's nice.
Well, it's not what we always do. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to illustrate it, because
I said you.
oh, that's what I always do. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to Zane's point. Recently I've been studying indigenous cultures in Canada, and they don't see the world the same way we do. They see themselves as part of a collective system. Like the human is part of a collective natural order, but it's not the highest point, and it's not like the leader or the top of the pyramid. Like we're just a speck, a whole part of a larger ecological system, and we're part of it, and we're stewards instead of consumers. It's a whole different way of thinking about the earth, and I think it's an important one.
One of the things beekeepers are doing this day, I'm a beekeeper, and one of the things we're doing is we're beginning not to call ourselves beekeepers, but changing the language to say we're stewards of the bees or for the bees. And I think that
exactly, that's an important concept.
Yeah.
That's a really important concept, yeah. I think, and to me, Isamu Noguchi was really pioneer in that. And he thought of the garden in so many ways, as an architectural realm, as a spiritual realm, as a metaphorical realm. It was a whole way of thinking about the creative space as a garden. And it kind of empowers all individuals as stewards and gardeners, if you will, to save the earth, and we can heal it. Look, when we had this COVID thing, all of those fossil fuels things stopped, and the earth began to heal itself. Look, the dolphins came back to Italy.
No, they didn't.
I mean, it can happen. Yeah, they did.
No, they didn't. That's fiction, not fact. Check it out.
No, they can.
Okay. Claudia.
I thought maybe we shift a bit the conversation. I'm very much interested in the idea of this presentation by Diogo on cybernetics and alchemy. I find this extremely interesting. For me, the basic question that this raises is, alchemy is normally associated with magic. You know, so how important is that? And is there magic in cybernetics? You know, how in which way does cybernetics relate to these kind of, yeah, to magic, myth? What kind of narrative structures are underlying this?
Well, I think there is a lot of magic in cybernetics, as well a lot of poetry. And my work, my research, it's a way of getting to know in more profound way those two disciplines, as if one reflects the other. I think that that is a comment that Zane made in my video about the perception of Jung about cybernetics, and that is, in his opinion, that I'm quoting his commentary. This makes me think that when one understands cybernetics as when one understands alchemy. And this is talked to me.
I'm sorry, what was that? Oh? One understands cybernetics as one understands what?
Alchemy.
Okay.
This is a comment made by Zane in my video that I think very interesting. In fact, Jung have been a great part of my research and my door to this world of alchemy. And I have found many other connections between alchemy and cybernetics, including the very idea of distinctions of Spencer Brown that connects much of the idea that is forms cybernetics.
Well, one of the interesting ideas, Diego, is in our discussion among ourselves yesterday, you had an Ouroboros in the background of the dragon. Okay, so the double dragon is actually the symbol of the American Society for Cybernetics, which has been changed to a formal description, I should say, a set of lines rather than the animals.
Yes.
See, that's one of my problems. I have a problem with that in conflict, if you will, because I think, and Ben, I'm glad he brought it up because I've been looking at that for 2 days now behind you. And to me, this instills in images of hierarchy. And I know some people think I'm silly about this, but you know, one of the things I'm interested in is floating hierarchies. You see how they have a crown on there, and I don't think that we are. I do think, from an autopoetic perspective, I'm a closed system internally.
Well, we got rid of the crown. Yes, we got rid of the crown.
No, he's got it on behind him. I'm
right, but I mean, in our.
I hate to do this to you, but it's breakout room time.
Oh, good.
Well, let me just say this. I think Diego is right. I think there's tremendous wisdom.
Zane, we've got to go to breakout.
In what?
Okay.
We've got to go to breakout rooms.
Goodbye.
Send us there.
Here's Margaret Mead on the blue. What I like to call Marvel. It was until we saw. It wasn't. It was not until we saw a picture of the Earth from the moon that we realized how small and how helpless this planet is. Something that we must hold in our arms and care for.
Position on the.
Goran, hello.
Dashboard and come on.
Hello, Judy. Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to see you all.
It's good to see your face. It's been a while.
I know. I thought we'd be seeing each other, Ricardo was saying, in Moscow or somewhere. This is a bit of a different way of seeing each other, but nonetheless, it's a pleasure. So
Yeah.
it's
It would be nice to be able to hang out together after the session.
yes.
Was I muted when I spoke?
Yes.
Okay, welcome back. And I would like to remind you that if you could put your questions from your group into the chat, we can start addressing them. Questions or comments or other observations, please.
We have a story. Ricardo has a story about a cybernetic technology. He was given by an old woman in Peru. Maybe we can get that story. So the question is whether these old technologies of native people are actually cybernetic technologies, or if we could consider them cybernetic technologies, or are they cybernetic technologies that we have to reinvent? Are they fundamentally different? So I would like to get that story maybe. So he's here, Ricardo. Maybe you tell it. Oh, he cannot hear me. Muted.
In the meantime,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, we got Ricardo?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I can speak. Yes, I remember many years ago, I showed this stone to in I don't remember where, in a meeting of the ASC, but I think in the original people, they use the art as a symbol to relation their needs with their goals. Yes, and they create things that are very beauty. For example, in a Colombian ancestral people, they make a statue that is like the thinker of Rodin. Yes, it's very similar, but they use as a word to preserve the lands where they use to their needs. Is like an offer to the heaven and so on. This is where the arts and the useful and the technology and also are work together. That is.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice story that could somehow contribute to what we've been discussing before, because it's really a question of what are these cybernetic technologies or tools, and shouldn't we consider these old technologies as cybernetic, or are they not?
I'm looking at the chat and there's another intriguing question here. What do you mean by magic anyway? I don't
Any
recall.
sufficient advanced
Task is
technology is
magic.
indistinguishable from magic.
Didn't we know? Didn't we learn that Pask is magic? Gordon Pask.
Mhm.
Well, I would argue that indigenous cultures are cybernetic in that they see themselves as an integral part of the ecological system. And what I learned about childhood development is they develop individual and independent thinkers, and they expect their children to communicate almost like intuitively in a different way. It's not, and so much of their culture was orally transmitted. They kind of had this thinking, whole different thing that we don't even really understand because it's not written down in the same way that we write it down. So I would argue that yes, they are cybernetic in that they're harmonic and that they're an integral part of the component system of nature.
Great.
So as a composer, I always am thinking about, okay, how can I give the listener a magical experience? And what do I mean by that? That's a good question. I'm going to have to think about that.
Well, even though alchemy seems like this obscure, archaic philosophy, I think it really rather is contrary to popular belief. It's not really about transmuting base metals into gold. Instead, it's more about the science, if you will, of inner liberation. One is never more creative, one is never more magical than when one is totally free. And this comes from facing the truths about oneself. And that's what alchemy is ultimately concerned with, is transformation and change. Wouldn't you say, Diego?
Yes, I agree.
Can I just add something there, Zane? When you say totally free, what do we mean here? Because we are all interdependent. So that's how things work, right? And
sure. Well, I think I meant free in the Jungian sense of wholeness.
Sure.
And so, although it may seem somewhat paradoxical at first blush, I think that we can only become truly whole and therefore truly free when we finally awaken to this thoroughgoing interconnectedness.
So that wasn't going to be my point. What I was really getting at is if we think about the world and how it's going in terms of if we think about most of human civilization and where we've been, we've only really been industrialized for quite a small period of time in the scheme of things. And if you it's like a minute of, the exact numbers don't matter. Yet at the same time, it seems to be that we think we know everything and we've got it right, and we're just hell-bent on efficiency. And as John Bedford says, doing the wrong things righter. So much of the time, in businesses, we talk about efficiency, and you have that conversation without thinking about effectiveness. And I hate to kind of throw the standard management consultancy 2x2 grid, but when you think about effectiveness and efficiency, you've got to find that right way of doing things. But in an industrialized world where we're always talking about efficiency and making productivity is the big word in UK public sector at the moment, improving productivity. But even though we've been hit by COVID, the economy has gone down the pan, for lack of a better word. Government is investing money in productivity, which essentially means automation. So how do we reconcile, the agenda of industrialization with productivity and AI and technology and efficiency, and tease back to effectiveness and wholeness and purpose? These things seem to be completely diametrically opposed.
I think this is where the whole idea of reflexivity comes in, that we have to look at how is it we're looking at this. We have to look at, it's important to pay attention, but we need, and then to see what we can see, but it's important just as much as to look at our seeing and saying, how do our assumptions affect what we're seeing and how we're thinking about things? This is the piece that I think cybernetics has to offer, this idea of reflexivity.
So if we take,
I have a point. I also would argue that that research and data are really important in this question, and analyzing the data on both sides, and realizing that productivity, yes, is important, development is important, shelter is important, all those industrial things are important to maintain our culture. However, so are trees, and we have to have a balance, and we need to study that and figure out what the balance is. It's not impossible. We're all really smart. We can figure out a balance so that we can figure out sustainable ways to power our industry that doesn't kill the planet. And we need to sustain, we need those energies to sustain, and we need it to be a closed loop, a closed system, so that our garbage becomes recycled, becomes clean, becomes part of the system that goes back into the factories, that become things that, and all of it is one closed system. It can be done. It's not being thought that way. And in terms of demography and data, we can figure it out. We can figure it out.
I think what Abdul is really talking about, I mean, if we're going to get down to the heart of what Abdul is talking about, it's anthropocentrism.
Right, and that's not the right.
And I think
paradigm. It's not the right paradigm.
Anthropocentrism is definitely the wrong.
He's talking about what is, not what could be. I would like to talk about what could be. That's what I want to do.
That's what I'm talking about.
We all know the problems that Abdul is pointing at. I think we're all well aware of that.
Wait a minute,
let me finish.
I'm talking about the necessity of adopting a kind of psychological anti-anthropocentrism. Which refers to the equivalence between everything that is anti-anthropocentric and everything that conscious human ego refuses to identify in itself.
Okay, so why don't we talk about what isn't rather than what we know what is, which is the problem. What is the problem. I'm interested in solutions, not regurgitating. And that's what I think.
Anthropocentrism is the solution.
Yeah, so
for you maybe, but not for me.
I think what Judy's pointing to is we need to talk about desires.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, we need to talk about desires, and we need to get other people to talk about desires. Not well, we're stuck in this.
Well, we need to invite people to consider the possibility of generating their desires and then generating false statements about their desires so that they might do something different. Trump's got that down. He does it extremely well.
This is the whole idea of against plausibility, is we don't have to be stuck in what everybody thinks is plausible.
Over and over and over again. How it doesn't work, how it doesn't work. I thought artists were about generating things that weren't yet possible.
Yeah, that's where I am. That's where I am.
Well, that's what my paper is all about, Judith.
We've come to the end of this particular time, but the room will be kept open. But those who need to go on to the SIBCOMS group, feel free to do so. And we will have the ASC reconvene in 2 hours from now. And the room feel free to continue, but I must go for other reasons.
So this addresses Elena's question, and that is that we will stick around for about 15 minutes. So if you want to stay and participate, please do.
I wanted to catch the other session.
Okay.
That's where we are, yeah.
Buddy?
There will be a hangout session after the last session this afternoon, so we'll have an hour for people to just chat.
Oh, good.
And will that last session be an extension of the one before it, or just will it be a new one?
No, the thing that starts from 2 to 3, I will keep the room open from 3 to 4 for hangout.
Okay, so the same room. So we could actually join that if we were in something else. Great, thank you.
Great. That was a good session. Yeah.
The sessions have all been very different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's good. It will be really good to explore this further. Candy said it in the very first session, and because I have here some team members now, in the first session, Candy mentioned that we have agreed for one journal, Technoetic Arts, which is actually Roy Ascott's journal, and who just hands it over to an editorial organism, as he calls it. And I have here some co-editors of mine, Delma, and I think John is here too. So there will be, the plan is that there will be a special ASC issue for this journal. And the focus of this journal is in visual arts normally, but Roy Ascott has had a very wide view of what technoetic art is. So there will be contributions possible from all kinds of areas, looking at
Brilliant.
experience and things like that. We haven't defined the call yet, so that's what we're going to do with Candy at the beginning of next week, and then we will send it out, I think.
So are you thinking you would like us to transform our videos into some kind of paper?
If you want, you could do that or do something else. I think is open. In you could just respond to some of the conversations that you found interesting, for example. It's totally open. I mean, there's no restriction. I think the plan, Candy has the plan to do a call for abstracts first, and then. So it's not, the idea is that people don't waste time. So the idea is, I think, to do a call for abstracts first and then to continue.
But does this mean we're all being invited to contribute?
Are we all invited? Because I would love to contribute.
Yeah, everyone will be invited.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claudia.
No.
And I loved your stuff. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Very meditative.
And I think
your delivery is very comforting.
Thank you.
I think anyone who's still in the group should just feel free to turn on your mic and contribute.
Yeah, it would be great to hear Larry on time. You have so many, you have so many things to say on time and cybernetic time. It would be great to hear you.
Yeah, I don't have the time. Good, it's after 3 o'clock, Larry.
Well, Zane, Judith and I were talking about an opera, and I would love for you to participate.
Say that one more time, Paul.
Judith and I were talking about an opera, and I would love for you to participate, because I really love your stuff, and I think it would be great if we all
brilliant. I would love to.
Collaborate.
Yeah, just say the word, Paul.
Please go to my site. I put it on the chat. It's paulstelson.com, and there's a little libretto in there that kind of outlines, but it's really open. But your stuff would fit right. We could just take your stuff and cut it up and stick it together.
You're not talking about. Yeah. But you're not talking about modus operandi, are you?
I am. Yeah. Did you read it?
You are talking about that. The 4D Matrix opera. Okay. So this is another opera.
Did you already read it?
I haven't read it yet. No, I haven't read it yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's on my site. You can read it on my site.
I really liked how you analogized music to your work, because as you say, it maps out time to bring the conversation back around timing. Because time is the fourth dimension. It's what makes your work 4D, as you say.
That's the easiest way to think about it. Yeah. There are other theories about time. That's the easiest way.
Yeah, one of the questions I was going to ask you today. One of the questions I was going to ask you today was who wrote the music.
Oh,
so am I to understand it hasn't been written yet?
Don't forget,
time is a
It's
human.
sort of been written. It sort of has.
What you say, Larry?
Some of it is on my.
You can't get a word in edgewise. I know. Go ahead.
Don't forget, time is a human invention.
There you go.
That's true. Thank you. Brilliant. No, but if you look also on my site, there are some animations, and I did all that music. So yeah. So yeah, but it's experimental. So it's kind of like cagey and simple. I mean, it's not really. No, you're right. It's not really written down yet, but it's an open system. It's an open systemic kind of thing. So. And it's meant to be dynamic with the times, and stuff, so that it's relevant, and it'll be fun. It's just a fun thing. Anyway, the Reno is on my site. Read over it, see what you can bring to it, and we'll talk about it later.
Good.
Yes, we can talk about it.
But you guys should have this conversation away from this group.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
So one of the questions that came up in the discussion was how you bring about the sort of thing that we've been doing. And one of the interesting things that happened yesterday was that Pele got us, our group together. So we just started getting to meet each other and talk about who we were. And so I think the fact that this has been a very lively group was a result of the hour, well, almost an hour, about 45 minutes yesterday that we spent as a group as a result of Pele getting us together. And so I think it was very interesting to see the dynamic today. And people may be wondering, well, where did that dynamic come from? You all seem to be pretty vociferous and argumentative, but you also seem pretty friendly and jolly about what you're doing. And I think it came about through this being able to meet informally, where we weren't under any kind of pressure that everybody was, a large group of people is watching us and so on. So
we should all be able to talk about anything. We should be able to disagree and still come away from the conversation as friends.
So the conversation, I think, which is a concept, I think, is the importance of conversation is something that Larry has really contributed to my life, to getting me to think about something I've been doing all my life, but haven't been thinking about it as a thing, as a process. And so I have to thank Larry for that. So thank you, Larry.
I wonder if I may ask a question that builds on that and also combines with what Jude was saying earlier about the not yet possible. So the conversation and the dialogue that occurs, I really appreciated, Judith, what you said about, here's the current state. We talk about what's currently possible, but we have trouble either as individuals and or groups expanding to the not yet possible, imagining and reimagining our worlds, potential worlds, and what could be done with them, what we might yet co-create. And I wonder if you can build a little bit on the not yet possible, especially as it pertains to that conversation piece.
Yes, I'd love to. There's this thing called the Desires Project or exercise. And what the Desires exercise does is have individuals and groups of people generate what they desire, what one desires. And I could go on about that, but I won't at the moment. And to talk with each other in relation to those desires in a way in which the conversation is participatory and embraces the asynchronicities and the tensions as opportunities to explore those possibilities. So the group, through the conversations of this sort, of course you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortableness in order to be a part of that conversation. And I think that those kinds of conversations also require a form of generosity, if you will, of open-mindedness. And also I would have come to think, I've developed, through Herbert Brun, he talks about a circularity of needs, and I've sort of extended that into the circularity of necessities when peace is a need. And I can share a paper with you that explores this a lot. And so once you have these desires, then you turn them into false statements, okay? So I want everyone, so my desire is that people desire to do desires exercise, okay? So a false statement would be, the ASC sponsors a conference about generating desires. Okay, so that's not true, but I pretend it's true. And then I can ask questions of that, how can I make that possible? You see what I'm saying? Am I being clear on this?
Yeah, if I'm interpreting correctly, and please forgive me if I'm not, is it about my individual desires within the context of a conversation and how we might put all of our desires together to co-create a combined future?
Yes, I like that interpretation a lot. And then working on those desires and those false statements and asking any and all the questions we can about how to make those things possible. And then performing in ways, and then there's this whole thing of performance. And then how do I perform in ways, which I attempt to do, that provoke that sort of exercise, if you will, be it in generating a conversation, or be it in generating a group of people interested in looking at desires, false statements, and then using them as a blueprint, if you will. But again, as I stated in my introduction, I like living by my desires. Something specific, yet general enough not to be goals, okay? So I'm amazed how and I've been doing this exercise for 20 some years now, I'm amazed how my desires affect my daily living without my even, I don't want to use the word consciousness. See, that's one of the beauties of coming to the ASC. It really makes me pay attention to my language. Anyway.
Judy, I think we've both used this with our classes.
Robert, we're going to disappear in another 30 seconds or less.
Okay. Larry, would you like to add anything to what I just said about desires? And Anna, let me post before we disappear that paper, if I can.
You're describing a design process.
Yes,
Hey,
that's
keep
what I
us
was
open for
deciding.
another 2 minutes, please.
Anna, send me an email and I'll get it to you, okay? jlombardi@jlombardi.net. Oh, that's not right. How do I get out of everyone? There you go. Okay, thanks for the question. And please feel free to, for me, it's about turning together with others in the learning process of how this might generate questions or comments. Please let me, and anybody else who wants a copy, it's a paper I wrote for the ASC 2018 about Herbert Brun, by the way. Have you seen that, Zane?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think the last time I looked at it was in 2018.
No, the paper was written in 2020 and published in 2020.
Oh, okay. Well, then I haven't seen it.
It's about Herbert and how he affected my cybernetics, maybe. But it talks about desires and other things, anti-communication, desires, composition, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
It's a paper you wrote, Judith?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
It was provoked by that 28 panel, which I thought totally so call for papers, and so I wrote this paper in response to that call about It took me a year to write it, Claudia.
Mm.